While I was having dinner with my son, trying to reclaim a little warmth after many years of silence, a message appeared on my phone. Leave now. Do not say anything to the boy. 30 minutes later, the police knocked on his door. But it all began on an ordinary afternoon when I still believed my retirement would pass quietly without any more storms. I am Harold Whitman, 69 years old, a former professor of architecture at the University of Portland. 35 years of teaching, more than 20 heritage preservation projects, one book often cited by professionals. These are the things I still carry with a sense of pride, even though most of my days now are spent circling within the old wooden house in the suburbs. My wife Eleanor died 7 years ago of lung cancer. Since then, the house has felt larger and so silent that at times I could hear the clock's second hand shifting on the wall. Eleanor's crystal wine glass still sits on the kitchen shelf, the one she used every Friday evening when we shared a bottle of Merlot. I have never been able to put it away. Once a week, I wash it, dry it, and place it back in its spot, as if by doing so she might walk in through the porch door, smiling, and ask me to pour just a little more. That afternoon, an autumn sunlight slanted through the window, casting golden streaks across the wooden table. I was rinsing the glass when the landline rang. The sharp sound shattered the quiet, making me drop the dish towel into the sink. On the screen, the name that appeared made my hand pause. Daniel Whitman, my only son. We had not spoken in nearly 2 years. The last time we saw each other, he walked out in the middle of dinner after I refused to lend him a large sum to save a collapsing real estate project. Since then, there had been no calls, no emails, no Christmas cards, only a few photos of my grandson sent through a mutual friend. I picked up the phone, my voice rough with surprise. Hello, Dad. Daniel's voice carried a hesitation as if he had stepped into a dark room and was unsure whether to stay. It's me, I swallowed hard. I did not think I would hear your voice today. I know it has been too long, but he paused. I could hear his steady breathing over the line. I want to invite you to dinner. Tonight. I stayed silent. Memories of our last argument, of the way he looked at me and said, "You do not trust me," rose quickly. Evelyn, my wife, and Nathan too, we want to see you. We moved to Lake Oswego last year. New house. We want you to come, have dinner like before, and put the past behind us. We have lost too much time. That sentence made me sink into the wooden chair near the window. For a moment, I pictured a family meal. The sound of cutlery touching porcelain, my grandson's laughter, and the feeling of being called Dad without heaviness or reproach. Tonight, yes, Evelyn is cooking beef burgundy, the dish you used to like. I think it is time. I looked at Eleanor's glass, light glinting across the surface. She always believed families would find their way back to each other, that no matter the misunderstandings, blood was a thread hard to break. All right, I will come. Good. The address is 1580 Redwood Lane, Lake Oswego. 7:30. I will wait for you at the door. The call ended, leaving me with a feeling both warm and strange. 2 years of silence and suddenly an invitation. I knew I should be cautious. Age teaches a man that. But I also knew that if I refused, this might be the last chance to mend what was broken. I dried the glass, put it back on the shelf, and stepped into the living room. From the small wine cabinet, I took out a vintage Pinot Noir, the one Eleanor had bought for our 25th anniversary. I had planned to save it for a special occasion. Perhaps tonight was the occasion. Before leaving, I stood for a moment before the wedding photo on the wooden table. Eleanor in her satin white dress, her hair pinned high, her eyes looking at me as if to remind me not to let pride stand in the way of family. I nodded lightly, then left the house, carrying the bottle of wine and the fragile hope that this dinner could begin a new chapter. I stepped off the porch, locked the door. From a man used to silence and distance, I suddenly realized I was looking forward to an evening, not just to share a meal, but to try trusting again. I still remember clearly the day Eleanor died. Not only because I lost the partner of more than 30 years, but because from that moment on, it was just Daniel and betrayal. He was only 22, a final year architecture student at the very university where I taught. I had just lost my wife, and I had become a father who had to play both roles. The first years after the funeral were far from easy. In the mornings, I taught classes. In the afternoons, I came home to cook. And in the evenings, I prepared lessons and graded projects with Daniel's questions about assignments in the times he came to ask for feedback on his designs in between. Once, near midnight, I was still standing by his desk, looking over the drawings for a community building he planned to submit to a national student competition. I felt quietly proud to see in him the same passion Eleanor once had when she was young, that fierce desire to turn ideas into speaking forms of concrete and glass. But in his final year, things began to change. Daniel started missing classes, arriving late, sometimes disappearing for an entire week. When I asked, he said he was joining a real-world project with a few new friends, a real opportunity to make money instead of just drawing on paper. At first, I did not interfere, thinking real-world experience might be good for him. But when he announced he was dropping out to fully invest in real estate, I knew I had underestimated the pull of promises of quick wealth. I tried to advise him, giving him numbers, breaking down the risks, even taking him to meet colleagues who had failed in the field. But Daniel would not listen. He told me, "You have lived your whole life in books and drawings. I do not want to repeat that." Those words cut deeper than I expected. In the next 2 years, he threw himself into one project after another, buying an old warehouse to turn into luxury apartments, investing in a riverside plot of land that was supposed to explode in value once the city built a new road. But each time, he failed. The market turned against him, partners walked away, and capital vanished faster than it takes to draft a decent design. Every time he lost money, Daniel came to me. At first, I still lent him money, partly because I believed he would learn his lesson, partly because I did not want him to feel abandoned. But over time, the loans grew larger, the reasons more vague, and the repayment plans never clear. When I asked for a proper report, he became angry, accusing me of not trusting my own son. The last time I agreed to help was when Daniel turned 30. After that, I realized I was draining my retirement savings and the heritage preservation fund Eleanor and I had built. I had to stop. About a year later, he came to my house on a Saturday evening. I remember the smell of roast chicken from the oven, 2 bottles of wine set on the table. I had hoped for a quiet dinner, but before I could pour the first glass, Daniel pulled a folder from his jacket. "I need you to co-sign a bank loan. Just this once." I looked at the number in the file, a loan larger than any before. I set the paper down and shook my head. "Daniel, I cannot keep doing this. I will not finance failure anymore." The air in the room thickened. He stayed silent for a few seconds, then stood. "You think I am a failure. I think you are pushing yourself to a point you cannot recover from, and I will not push with you." He let out a dry, bitter laugh, then slid the papers back into his case. "I understand. You will see that you are wrong." He left the table and walked quickly to the door. The slam echoed through the house, leaving me alone at the untouched dinner. The chicken cooled, the wine remained sealed. I did not know if I felt angry, hurt, or relieved. Perhaps all at once. From that day, contact between us became less and then disappeared entirely. Occasionally, I received postcards showing parks or museums with no message, just signed Nathan, my grandson. I knew it was Daniel's way of letting me know the boy was growing, healthy, but that he did not want me involved. Time passed, and I learned to live with the absence. I focused on research projects, took on a few freelance consulting jobs, sometimes taught a short course. At night, when the house was so quiet I could hear the wind slipping through the doorframe, I still wondered if I had been too harsh on my son. But then I remembered the look in his eyes the night he walked away. Not the look of someone hurt because his father refused to help, but the look of someone determined to find another way to get what he wanted, right or wrong. I still loved him, even though every memory between us now felt like an old bridge, unsure if it could bear the weight of a return. But part of me had already closed that door to protect what Eleanor and I had built. From downtown Portland to Lake Oswego takes about 40 minutes, but that afternoon the road felt longer. The hired car carried me away from my familiar neighborhood, along the red maple shaded streets by the Willamette River, then toward an area I had only read about in real estate pages, where the houses looked as though they had been taken straight from the glossy spreads of an architecture magazine. Daniel's villa sat at the end of a gentle slope, hidden behind a row of cedar trees. The wrought iron gate swung open to reveal a stone-paved drive, curving toward a two-story structure faced with pale stone, slate-tiled roof, and floor-to-ceiling glass panels reflecting the sunset. In the front yard, a semicircular fountain framed an abstract bronze sculpture. Everything carried the scent of money and the careful art of display. The car stopped at the steps. I had barely stepped out when the door opened. A woman in her 50s, hair neatly pinned, wearing a black uniform with a spotless white apron, stepped forward. "Mr. Whitman." Her voice was soft yet clear. "Yes, I am Clara, the family's housekeeper. Please come in, they are waiting." Her smile was polite, but her eyes were different. For a moment, Omeshaw, I was not sure what it was, but I thought I saw a flicker of concern, quick as the shadow of a bird across water. I stepped into the foyer and immediately recognized that Daniel had hired an expensive interior designer. White marble floors veined with gray, a walnut staircase curving in a smooth arc, iron railings with classical scrollwork. A crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, light glancing off large oil paintings lining the hallway. The air carried the faint scent of new wood and a light perfume, perhaps from the lilies arranged in each corner. "Dad." Daniel's voice came from the far end of the hall. He walked quickly toward me, wearing a crisp white shirt, charcoal trousers, his hair neatly cut, his skin tanned and healthy. I realized he had changed, or at least had worked to create a more successful version of himself. He hugged me, tighter than I expected. "Glad you came." "So am I, Daniel." A young woman appeared behind him, Evelyn, his wife. A wine-red silk dress fitted to her frame, blonde hair falling in loose waves, lips painted a soft red. She stepped forward, smiling like a hostess at a diplomatic reception. "I am very glad to finally meet you." I nodded, shook her hand. "Thank you for the invitation." "No, I should be the one thanking you. Tonight is an important occasion for our family." Daniel took my arm and led me into the living room. Navy blue velvet sofas, a low glass table, a marble-faced gas fireplace. On the table, a tray of cheese and fruit beside an open bottle of Pinot Noir. "You like this one, remember?" Daniel smiled, pouring my first glass. I lifted it, inhaling the warm aroma of red wine. We sat down and immediately the conversation turned to matters I had not expected to discuss on our first meeting in years. "You still hold the rights to those Old Town heritage designs, right?" Daniel asked, as if it were casual conversation. "Of course. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I heard the city will be funding restorations. Those holding the rights will benefit greatly." Evelyn joined in, her voice light but guiding. "I have always admired your work, especially the city library building. If I were you, I would seize the chance to commercialize part of it. More income and your legacy preserved." I smiled lightly, committing to nothing. We went on talking, but Daniel soon circled back to my old wooden house in the suburbs. He asked if anyone had tried to buy it, what it might be worth now, and how much profit I could make if I sold. Evelyn tilted her head, her eyes bright as if picturing something. I finished the first glass, and Danielle immediately refilled it. The wine was good, smooth, but barely 10 minutes later, I felt my face warming and my head light in a way that was not normal. Evelyn smiled gently, spoke of Nathan, my grandson, learning piano, then steered the conversation back to the future and the legacy for the next generation. Daniel added comments about asset protection plans and legal paperwork to be prepared early, still within the bounds of family conversation, but sharp enough for me to sense an undercurrent of pressure. I looked at the red wine swirling under the light, wondering why I felt dizzy so soon. Clara entered carrying the appetizers, small tarts topped with goat cheese and cherry tomatoes. As she set the plate down, her eyes flicked over me. For a moment, I caught a tightness around her eyes and a blink that lasted a fraction longer than usual. "I will prepare the main course now," she said, turning away. But I noticed her steps were quicker, the sound of her shoes on the wooden floor carrying out of the room. That last look, before she disappeared beyond the doorway, seemed to hold something words could not. I felt my heart beat faster, not from the wine, but from something else. A faint suspicion had slipped into what had seemed an evening of warmth. I sat there listening to Daniel and Evelyn talk, but my mind was beginning to detach from the conversation. There was something in the way they asked their questions, in the way Clara had left the room, and in the unusual effect of that wine that made me wonder whether I was sitting in a family reunion or in something else I had not yet named. The second glass had barely touched my lips when the dizziness became much more distinct. This was not the gentle intoxication I was used to. It felt like something that blurred the line between clarity and haze, forcing me to take a deep breath just to stay focused. Daniel and Evelyn's voices continued steadily on either side, yet somehow my ears began to filter each word, as though my mind were selectively recording certain phrases and discarding the rest. Evelyn was talking about Nathan, then smoothly shifting into the topic of family asset planning. Daniel added phrases like legal documents, power of attorney, early transfer to avoid trouble later. My phone vibrated once in my pocket, then stopped. I slipped my hand in, thumb sliding the screen open. A new message appeared from an unknown number, only 10 words, written entirely in capitals. Leave now. Do not tell the boy anything. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. The boy, was that Nathan or Daniel? My hand tightened around the phone under the table, unease spreading quickly through me. Are you feeling unwell, Dad? Evelyn tilted her head toward me. I forced a smile. No, just a little warm. Maybe I should get some air. Daniel set his glass down, a flicker of tension in his eyes. Let me come with you. No need. I will be right back. I stood and walked toward the sliding door to the backyard. Cool Lake Oswego air flowed in, carrying the scent of grass and a trace of lavender from the row planted along the fence. The light from the house cast a small pool onto the lawn, the rest swallowed by darkness. I had taken only a few steps when a whisper came from the left side of the porch. Mr. Whitman. I turned sharply. Clara stood there, still holding an empty silver tray, glancing around as if afraid to be seen. She gestured for me to follow her toward the back of the garden, where cedar trees blocked the light. What is it, Clara? She lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. You must not drink another drop of that wine. There is a strong sedative in it. I felt my chest tighten. What? Daniel and Evelyn? They put it in your glass. Not enough to harm you immediately, but enough to make you groggy, agreeable. They have prepared the power of attorney and transfer papers. Tonight they will have you sign them. I searched her face for any trace of a joke, but Clara's eyes were steady, fearful, impossible to doubt. Are you certain? I heard them. 3 days ago, while cleaning Daniel's office, they spoke right in front of me, thinking I did not understand English. But I understood every word. They said they would get you to drink 2 or 3 glasses, that the drug would cloud your memory, and by the time you woke, it would all be done. The flush in my face and the unsteady tilt in my head were suddenly explained. The truth hit like a bucket of cold water. My son, the boy I had raised alone for nearly half my life, was trying to harm me. Not by accident, but through a meticulous plan, with an accomplice, with documents ready, and with drugs. Why are you telling me this? My voice was rough. Clara swallowed hard. Because you once asked about my health, offered me coffee in the kitchen, called me by my name. They never did. I cannot let this happen. I turned away, forcing back the wave of shock. Memories surged. Daniel as a child, sketching beside me in the workshop. Daniel on his grade school graduation day. Daniel laughing as he showed me his new driver's license. And now, Daniel sitting inside, waiting for me to return so he could put a folder in front of me. Where are the papers? On Daniel's desk upstairs. But tonight they will bring them down, pretending to talk about the future. I drew a deep breath, the jolt of betrayal clearing my mind. Thank you, Clara. Do you have a phone? She nodded, handing me an old handset. I quickly keyed in my number and gave it back. Say nothing. If anyone asks, tell them I went outside to take a call from an old friend. She nodded and backed toward the house, leaving me alone in the dark. Cold air slid down my collar, but colder still was the sense of loss rising in my chest. My son, the one I thought would carry on after me, had chosen this path. Not a slip, not a moment of weakness, but a clear decision to exploit his father's trust to take everything. I walked back into the house, my face once again composed. My hand rested briefly on the half-finished glass of wine before setting it down as if nothing had happened. Daniel smiled. Evelyn poured more wine, but I raised a hand. I have had enough. Just water now. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded and went to get it. Daniel leaned toward me. How are you feeling? I looked straight into his eyes, keeping my tone even. More alert than you think. He smiled, but I saw the flicker of caution in his gaze. In my mind, a new plan had taken shape. I would not leave yet. I would stay fully aware and watch exactly what they intended to do. This time, I would be the one in control, and I would not let a single page be signed unless the police were there to witness it. I sat at the table listening to them speak, but now every word, every gesture, every glance was being recorded in my mind as evidence. If Daniel thought the evening would end with my signature, he had forgotten who had taught him to read every hidden line in a blueprint, and that once I saw the concealed design, I would know exactly what the real structure was. I stepped into the bathroom at the end of the first-floor hallway and locked the door. My right hand held the phone to my ear, thumb pressing the button for 911. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm yet firm. 911, what is your emergency? This is Harold Whitman. I am at 42 Silver Birch Lane, Lake Oswego. My son and his wife are attempting to drug my wine to force me to sign over my assets. I am still lucid, and I want the police to arrive and catch them in the act. I lowered my voice and explained briefly. I have had 2 glasses of wine containing the drug, but was warned in time. The suspects are preparing to bring out the papers for me to sign. There is a witness, Clara, the housekeeper. Are you safe at this moment? The dispatcher asked. I am safe, but I need them to believe I suspect nothing. You must arrive without their knowledge. Understood. A unit will be there within 10 minutes. Keep your phone nearby and continue to stall. I ended the call, splashed cold water on my face, and checked in the mirror to ensure no hint of suspicion showed. When I stepped out, the warm light of the dining room wrapped around me again, but this time I walked in as a different man. No longer someone cornered. Daniel looked up, pretending cheer. Are you all right, Dad? Fine. Just needed a few minutes to steady myself, I said, sitting down with my hands resting lightly on the table, far from the wine glass. I was just thinking, Evelyn said, forcing a light tone. Perhaps tonight we could discuss the future, so you do not have to worry. I smiled, speaking slowly. The future. That reminds me of a story, and I began to tell it. Not a new one, but old enough that Daniel would have to sit and listen. The time his mother and I built our first house with our own hands. The summers we camped along the Columbia River. The days he drew his first designs in my workshop. I stretched each detail, letting the minutes pass. Daniel gave a tight smile, but I saw him glance at his watch. Evelyn stole a look toward the stairs leading to the office upstairs. I went on, my voice even and low, deliberately choosing memories they could not easily interrupt. From the kitchen corner, Clara appeared, her eyes blinking once, a signal that she had secured my wine glass and bottle. The evidence was safe. Dad, Daniel cut in, trying to keep his voice controlled. That is a nice story, but I think now I remember another detail, I interrupted. When you were 17 and I took you to the Seattle exhibit, I could see the restlessness on his face. Evelyn began twisting a pen in her hand, thumb snapping the cap over and over, the sharp clicks like dry twigs breaking. They were losing patience. I took a sip of water, then slowly set the glass down. No one knew that in my vest pocket, my phone was still on record mode, capturing every word while I waited for the vibration that would tell me the police were near. Daniel exhaled sharply and stood. Let me just grab some papers. You only need to sign and it will be done. Evelyn rose with him, a glint of urgency in her eyes. I knew the moment was close. Take your time, I said evenly. It is a beautiful night, do you not think? The window open like this, the breeze from the lake is refreshing. He hesitated half a second, then nodded stiffly and turned away. I watched him go, then let out a slow breath. In less than 3 minutes, the police would arrive. Clara stepped closer, setting a water pitcher on the table, whispering, I have locked the bottle and glass in the cabinet. If they ask, I will say you finished it. I gave a slight nod. Thank you. Footsteps came down the stairs. Daniel returned with a black folder in hand. Evelyn followed, smiling with her mouth, but taut in the eyes. "Dad," Daniel said, opening the folder, "this is just a simple legal form to avoid trouble if someday you are not of sound mind." He placed the papers before me, along with a pen. "Just sign here." I glanced down, reading the words, "Irrevocable power of attorney." I did not touch the pen. "I will read it first." "You trust him?" Evelyn said softly, as if pouring honey. "Trust is exactly why I must read," I replied, eyes still on the document. I stretched the seconds, reading aloud meaningless lines to buy time. Daniel began bouncing his leg under the table, his gaze darting toward the door as if waiting for something. Then from outside, red and blue lights flashed across the window. Just a moment, but enough to make Daniel's eyes widen and his hand freeze. A firm, deliberate knock sounded at the door. I leaned back in my chair and took a long breath. "I believe your guests have arrived." The knocking on the door came again, louder, more urgent. Daniel flinched slightly, his hand frozen on the folder of documents. Evelyn shot me a quick glance, then turned to her husband. Lips pressed tightly together. I calmly pushed my chair back, my voice low. "We should open the door." Daniel tried to brush it off. "Probably just a neighbor, we can wait." But the third knock came with a voice calling out, "Lake Oswego Police. Open the door immediately." The air froze. Evelyn stood rigid in the middle of the room, her eyes darting as if searching for an escape. Daniel swallowed hard but tried to keep his composure as he walked toward the hallway. I rose and followed. When the door swung open, the blue and red lights from the patrol car flooded the living room, slicing across the walls and ceiling like blades. Two uniformed officers stepped inside, followed by a plainclothes female investigator. We received a report of elder abuse and attempted poisoning. One officer spoke evenly, firmly. "What?" Daniel let out a short laugh. "This is a mistake. Someone made this up. We will verify that right now." The investigator's tone was sharp as she moved toward the dining room. "Please stay where you are." Clara emerged from the kitchen corner holding a small locked pouch. "This is the wine bottle and the glass Mr. Whitman drank from tonight." I kept them untouched. The investigator took them, pulled on gloves, and placed them into an evidence bag. Another officer picked up the stack of papers on the table, glanced at them, and slid them into a separate folder. "This is an irrevocable power of attorney. Once signed, all of Mr. Harrell's assets would be under Daniel Whitman's permanent control." Evelyn's expression darkened. Daniel turned to me, his voice cracking. "Dad, I just wanted to help you manage everything. You are old now. Manage it by putting drugs in my wine." I did not raise my voice, but each word dropped heavy as stone. Daniel stayed silent. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice trembling, yet still trying to stay composed. "This was a misunderstanding. We were under pressure because of debts, and you should discuss that with your lawyer." The investigator cut her off. An officer stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. "Daniel Whitman, Evelyn Whitman, you are under arrest for attempted poisoning, fraud, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." Daniel suddenly jerked, staring at me. "Dad, I wasn't trying to kill you. I just wanted you to sign. I am in too deep. I owe the bank. I owe people. They will kill me if—" I looked straight into his eyes. Eyes that once shone with pride when he showed me his first design, now filled only with panic and desperation. I knew he was waiting for a lifeline. "You chose to sell trust, and I am not buying it back." Daniel froze as if slapped. His lips trembled, but no more words came. Evelyn dropped her head, letting the cuffs lock around her wrists. As they were led toward the door, Daniel turned back one last time. "Dad, please." I said nothing. I stood still, one hand resting on the back of the chair, watching the blue and red lights flicker outside. The wind from the lake drifted in, carrying the chill of night. A young officer looked back, his voice softer. "Are you all right, Mr. Whitman?" I nodded. "Fine." For the first time in years, the investigator gathered the last pieces of evidence, noting them in her report. Clara stood beside me, her warm hand resting lightly on my arm. "I am sorry for not warning you sooner. You did enough, and in time." When the police cars drove off and the wail of sirens faded into the night, I slowly sat down. The glass of water was still on the table, cold condensation clinging to its sides. I lifted it and drank deeply, not for thirst, but to erase the bitter taste left from those two poisoned glasses of wine. The house was quiet now. Only the ticking of the wall clock remained, as if reminding me that tonight, a chapter of life had closed. No more wondering if things could be mended, no more missed calls, only the absolute clarity that I had kept both my life and my dignity. I stood and reached for my coat. Clara asked, "Are you leaving now?" "Going home. It has been long enough." Stepping onto the porch, I looked one last time at the grand but cold house. The lights still glowed, but there was no one inside I wished to return to. The wind off the lake swept past again, this time carrying no scent of wine or sedatives, only the smell of freedom. Portland welcomed me back with the light drizzle of early winter. The road shaded by red maple trees leading into the quiet suburb looked just as it had decades ago, only with a few new coffee shops at the corners. The taxi stopped in front of my wooden house, where my wife Margaret once planted rows of lavender along the fence. They had long since dried, yet the scent still lingered somewhere in the air when the wind passed through. I opened the door and the familiar space flowed in. The smell of aged wood, the creak of hinges, the soft glow from the lamp in the living room. The kitchen still held the same tea set Margaret and I had bought in Kyoto in 1985. Only now I stood there alone. I hung my coat on the hook, poured a glass of water, and sat in the armchair by the window. Outside, raindrops clung to the glass, the street light casting small golden dots in their reflections. I felt drained but not defeated. Everything I had just gone through, painful as it was, had given me a strange clarity. I had lost my blood family, but I still had the right to choose who my family would be. The next day I called Clara. Her voice was as warm as it had been that night in Lake Oswego, when she had touched my hand lightly to warn me of danger. I asked her to come to Portland for a few days. She hesitated, then agreed. 3 days later, I met her at the bus station. The air was cold, our breaths white in the morning light. I brought her home, brewed a pot of hot tea, and laid out the plan I had been working on all night. "Clara, I want you to work with me, not as a housekeeper. I will establish a nonprofit organization, the Aiko Foundation, to preserve and restore old buildings in Portland and surrounding areas. You will handle coordination because you have the skills to organize and to work with people." She widened her eyes, "But I do not have the documents to work officially here." "I will take care of that. I have a few old friends from the university who can help with a visa and a long-term contract." She was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I did not think I would have the chance to do something meaningful again." "We both still have that chance, Clara. We just need to begin." In the weeks that followed, the wooden house became the temporary headquarters of the Aiko Foundation. I rearranged the tables, opened old filing cabinets, and set up a bulletin board filled with drawings and photos of historic buildings. Clara sat at the corner desk, making calls and sending invitations to others who shared our passion. News spread faster than I expected. A few young architecture students came by, saying they wanted to learn from my experience. I agreed immediately, opening a free class every Saturday. The first session had only 4 people. We sat around the table as I laid out an old blueprint of a train station I had designed in 1978. I explained how to choose materials that suited the climate, how to calculate natural lighting, and the things not found in textbooks, like how to persuade a conservative council to believe in your vision. Every time I saw their eyes light up with understanding, I felt pieces of myself being put back together. Clara would sometimes bring fresh pastries from the kitchen to set beside the pot of tea. She was also getting used to managing paperwork and applying for grants from community funds. One day I found her sitting quietly before a black and white photograph of an old bridge in Kyoto, her gaze far away. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. "I am thinking how lucky I am that there is still time to do something good before it is too late." I knew that feeling. We began taking on small projects, restoring an old library, renovating a brick house from the 1920s. I took the students to the work sites so they could touch each brick, smell the old pine wood, and understand that architecture was not just about form, but about the memories of a community. Spring arrived, and the lavender in front of the house began to sprout again. Clara, the students, and I planted a few more rows. When the wind blew, the porch filled with fragrance. just as it had in the years when Margaret was still alive. I realized I no longer felt emptiness when thinking about the family I had lost. Instead, I had a new family, not born of blood, but chosen and built on trust. One evening after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in the kitchen with my last cup of tea for the day. Clara came in carrying an envelope. "This is a letter from one of the students the other day. He wrote to thank you for giving him a chance to learn without paying tuition." I opened it and read slowly. The last line said, "I did not just learn about architecture. I learned that the true value of a life is what you leave behind for others." I folded the letter and placed it beside the stack of new blueprints. Outside, the spring rain fell softly, tapping a steady rhythm on the roof of the wooden house. I knew I had found my place in this world again, not through money or fame, but through the young hands now holding hammers and pencils, continuing the story I had spent my whole life writing. The months after the incident in Lake Oswego passed slowly yet heavily. Each day now had its own rhythm for me. In the morning, I opened the door to let the light flood into the wooden house, drank a cup of black coffee, then walked to the Aiko Foundation workshop. The work never ended, but it was the kind of work that kept my mind at peace, rebuilding a collapsed roof, fitting each brick like a puzzle piece, listening to young students debate solutions for a century-old structure. News of Daniel and his wife's case spread through the community, especially in the architecture and real estate circles. Some people called to check in, others simply stayed silent, avoiding the subject. I did not care. What mattered to me was that I had protected the most important thing, my own value and dignity. Daniel spent more than 2 weeks in jail before being released on bail. I did not visit him. I did not even finish reading the messages he sent, mostly circular excuses, blaming debt pressure and what he called a momentary mistake. Deep down, I knew he was waiting for a signal from me, a door left slightly open so he could step in and pretend nothing had happened. But I did not open that door. One late spring afternoon, I was inspecting a wooden window frame at the workshop when Clara called. "You have a visitor." I stepped into the front room of the headquarters and saw Daniel standing there, thinner than before, dark circles under his eyes. He wore an old jacket, held a knit cap in his hands, standing frozen like a boy called to the front of the class. Clara quietly withdrew. "Dad," he began, his voice hoarse, "I know I did something terrible. I just wanted to say I am sorry." I looked at him, neither angry nor pitying. An apology is not the key to restore what you destroyed. He lowered his head, hesitating. "I just hope for a chance to make it right." I folded my arms, standing tall, my voice slow and clear. "There are things you can buy back with money, but once you have sold trust cheap, you will never buy it back." Daniel closed his eyes, then turned and walked out without another word. I knew he would not return anytime soon, if he returned at all. After that, I no longer thought of Daniel with anger or bitterness. I thought of him as a part of the past already closed, a chapter I had read enough of and had no need to reopen. In the space my blood family had left behind, I had found another kind of family. The students who came to class on Saturday mornings, the volunteers who helped repaint old windows, Clara patiently organizing stacks of documents. One summer evening, when we had just finished restoring an old train station, the whole group sat down for dinner right on the platform, under temporary strings of warm yellow lights. A student asked me, "Do you ever regret it about your family?" I looked into his eyes and saw curiosity, but also respect. Regret is something everyone has, but I have learned that sometimes loss is not the end. It is simply a way to make space for something new and more right to come into your life. He nodded, asking nothing more. We kept eating in the sound of the night wind and a train far in the distance. Portland in the fall always carries a gentle beauty. Maple leaves turn red and fall in waves over the roof of the wooden house. I hung back up our wedding photo in Japan, where Margaret wore a white dress and I was in a black suit, both of us smiling brightly. That picture did not just remind me of love, but also of the values we once believed in, and that I still keep: integrity, kindness, and the ability to stand tall no matter how strong the storm. Sometimes when I locked up the workshop at the end of the day, strangers would stop by, asking about classes or bringing old blueprints to be restored. I had never refused anyone as long as they truly respected the building and the history behind it. I understood that I was not only repairing old structures, but also helping to mend trust, my own and that of those who came to me. Clara once said, "Harold, you are not just rebuilding structures, you are rebuilding your life." I smiled, maybe both. But the difference this time is that I know exactly what my foundation is made of. My story is not meant to teach anyone a lesson, but if there is one thing I want people to remember, it is this. Never trade trust for any short-term gain. Money can be earned again, a reputation can be restored, but once you have betrayed someone's trust, you have lost something that cannot be priced and cannot be bought back. As for Daniel, I do not know if he will ever understand this. But for me, keeping my boundaries intact and not letting him return to break them again is the real victory. Now, each time I walk into the workshop and see young hands drawing, measuring, and dreaming of the buildings they will create, I know I have chosen the right path. I no longer need to prove anything to anyone, least of all to those who once chose to betray me. Because the greatest victory is not making someone bow their head, but protecting yourself and continuing to live true to what you believe. There are things you can buy back with money. But once you have sold trust cheap, you will never buy it back. If this story speaks to you, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people can hear this journey. Because sometimes a single strong story is enough to help someone realize their own worth.